We are going to have a writing activity a little bit later in the sermon. So everybody should have 2 index cards and something to write with. If you don't have something to write with, one of the ushers will be around with some pens. Yeah. May as well. Thank you. You can just split them. Yeah, there's plenty. Thank you. Bless everyone who I surprise with activities on Sunday mornings. Our reading this morning is Rend Your Heart by Jan Richardson for Ash Wednesday. Even now, says the Lord, return to me with all your heart, with fasting, with weeping, and with mourning. Rend your hearts and not your clothing. That is from Joel chapter 2, verses 12 and 13. To receive this blessing, all you have to do is let your heart break. Let it crack open. Let it fall apart so you can see its secret chambers, the hidden spaces where you have hesitated to go. Your entire life is here, inscribed whole upon your heart's walls. Every path taken or left behind, every face you turned toward or turned away, every word spoken in love or in rage, every line of your heart you would prefer to leave in shadow. Every story that shimmers with treasures known and those you have yet to find. It could take you days to wander these rooms, 40 at least. And so let this be a season for wandering, for trusting the breaking, for tracing the rupture that will return you to the one who waits, who watches, who works within the rending to make your heart whole. There is a strength that comes with loving and knowing you will die, and you can see it in the eyes of those who remember and who still refuse to love any less than with their whole selves, reads the print from Story People. As someone who was raised unchurched and as a non-theist, but still obviously surrounded by Christian practices, thoughts, and culture, I decided in seminary to explore some of the liturgical seasons like Lent and Advent. At first glance, and for some traditions, Lent has the feel of, well, impending death. The 40 days of the season of Lent are meant to be reminiscent of Jesus's 40 days in the desert or wilderness when he was tempted by Satan and before entering his public ministry. So the 40 days of Lent are meant to inspire individuals to undergo deep, vulnerable changes and challenges prior to Jesus's death on the cross and the subsequent celebration of the resurrection on Easter. Death is hard. We lose everything we love as we're dying. While for many this can be a peaceful, slow transition to whatever it is that comes next. For many others, it is of the greatest hardship. Dying often quickly helps us know what is important to us, and so to enjoy our remaining time with those things and people. And this changes us, both dying and survivors. As the Sephardic Jewish poet, physician, and philosopher Judah Halevi wrote almost a millennium ago, "'Tis a fearful thing to love what death can touch, a fearful thing to love, to hope, to dream, to be, and oh, to lose. A thing for fools this, and a holy thing to love. For your life has lived in me, your laugh once lifted me, your word was gift to me. To remember this brings painful joy. 'Tis a human thing, love, a holy thing, to love what death has touched." But that's not Lent's whole intent. While many experience Lent as a time of giving up, especially as children, I know many of you probably gave up things like chocolate when you were little. Of the things that we love most, it is more than that. Lent is a time of intentionally making space. One way we do this can be to give something up, something that we really love or something that's taking up a lot of time or mental, emotional, or spiritual energy in our lives. Another perspective is that we shift our priorities. Lent is about focusing our energy on our spiritual relationships and deepening our senses of wonder and faith. Kate Bowler's beautiful memoir, No Cure for Being Human, for example, recounts her story of having been diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. She underwent surgery and chemo and immunotherapy and somehow went into remission. But her life was changed by the experience of dying. She writes, "And when I look closely at my life, I realize that I'm not just learning to seize the day. In my finite life, the mundane has begun to sparkle. The things I love, the things I should love, become clearer, brighter." In an excerpt from Ash Wednesday in Lent, beginning again always, Benedictine Sister Joan Chittister writes, "Lent is a call to weep for what we could have been and are not. Lent is the grace to grieve for what we should have done and did not. Lent is the opportunity to change what we ought to change and have not. Lent is not about penance. Lent is about becoming, doing, and changing whatever it is that is blocking the fullness of life in us right now. Lent is a summons to live anew." She continues, "Lent is the time to let life in again, to rebuild the worlds we've allowed to go sterile, to fast and weep and mourn for the goods we've foregone. In our own lives, we are not to die from lack of nourishment. If we are not to die from lack of nourishment, we must sacrifice the pride or the sloth or the listlessness that blocks us from beginning again." For a variety of reasons, I have been thinking a lot about grieving. I know we liberal people have been angry, and we should be. Maybe as individuals, you've done some of your own grieving at the state of this country right now, or whatever it is you might have to grieve, but we haven't done it together, and I feel its presence in my life and in the lives of so many of my family, friends, and colleagues. I recognize it even when it's not the primary feeling or emotion being expressed by someone. As a chaplain and minister, I've spent a lot of time with people who are grieving. People in hospitals don't call for chaplains when they're having a good day. They call because they're dying, or someone they love died or is dying, or they're struggling with addiction or mental health issues, or got a hard or complicated diagnosis that will change their life, or they need surgery and they're scared, or any number of reasons. And we don't just grieve death of anyone we love, including pets or illness, and the many complications that can come with these. We grieve for jobs we've lost or jobs we never had, estrangement from family or friends, including due to the polarization of life in America, divorce or separation, changes in relationships, a move and the many changes and challenges that entails, a loss of community or communities, miscarriage, imprisonment, retirement, children leaving home, parents coming to live with us, difficulties in relationships, changes in eating habits, how we celebrate holidays, the life we used to have before whatever, or a future that never happened, or dreams that we had that never came to fruition, or a past that we never had. We also grieve for the way that the world hurts from the damage humans cause, the extinctions of species, changes in their habitats, the climate crisis, and other related environmental losses. As a society, we have never grieved the pandemic and all of its consequences. Many of us now are also grieving the losses of our personal rights and freedoms and safety. This is when and why we need to be together to acknowledge not just the vulnerability of all of our lives, but the tenderness of what it means to be alive in this place, in this moment. We need to be reminded that we are not ever alone in this. The purpose of religious communities is to celebrate, grieve, call for justice, honor, and mark every part of human life publicly. To remind us that we are connected with others and that we are wired to be together. As our beloved 20th century Unitarian theologian James Luther Adams said, "Church is a place where you get to practice what it means to be human." It's possible at this point in our society. It's the only public place where we get to do that. Grief is an integral part of healing. It is transforming, metabolizing sorrow and anger into contentment, peace, even joy. And so I want us to do a grief ritual, inviting us to surrender what might be holding us back. What is something that you are grieving? Or maybe it doesn't feel like grieving, but something that you're mad about or fearful of. So everyone has 2 index cards if you're in the building. If you're on Zoom, you can write down on a scrap of paper, type into the chat, or you're welcome to email me at tryuurev@gmail.com. In the spirit of Lent, on one card, I want you to write what you are grieving or what you want to let go of in this season. I don't mean recent major deaths and the things that you're meant to be holding, but maybe you watching the news all the time, or the feeling of betrayal or hurt that so many people didn't vote, and the ones who did gave us this horrible administration, or whatever it is that it's time to let go of. Maybe you're still grieving the pandemic. Whatever it is, write it down. On the other, I want you to write what you want to allow more of into your life, what you plan to make space for by letting go of this other thing. Maybe it's more time with this community or another that you love, or your family, or a spiritual practice, or something else. So the questions again, what are you letting go of and what are you letting in? How would you like your life to be transformed in this season? I'm going to give you a minute or 2 to write down your answers, and then I will be inviting you up to leave your intentions in the baskets that are up here, marked for letting go and letting in. I invite you to consider sharing with each other during coffee hour or another time if you would like an accountability partner especially, or if you would like to share, but you do not have to. Lent helps us connect deeply with our own humanity. It's a way for us to grieve the things that we hadn't thought to grieve before. Maybe we were too busy living or surviving, and we hadn't grown to see the ways that we were harmed or caused harm. Lent invites us to do the inward searching and notice what it brings up. Lent invites us to hold those things, to love them, and to let them go or let them shape us as they will. Lent reminds us that although the journey we take is ours alone, we journey better together with others. Lent is part of a ritual that comes every year, giving us new opportunities to learn and see what comes up. And when we are in it, it's helpful to remember both that it's a short time, about 6 weeks, but also that we cannot be expecting a particular outcome. That's the mystery of it, and why practicing can bring us so much, we don't know. We have to let go of the expectations of what will be on the other side and just be in it. And when we can do this, we ourselves can appreciate more fully the joy and awe of a life resurrected, not someone else's, but our own. And when we practice in community, we can celebrate this new life together, these new awarenesses that we've all had. Lent brings us back to the core of who we are, to our beliefs and values. The 6 weeks can seem like a long time, but part of its beauty is that it gives us the opportunity to not only realize things, but then to also practice acting on them. And this is where the transformative power of Lent is, in that practicing. With humility, honesty, and integrity, we can focus our energy on what is most important. Remember, you are dust, and to dust you shall return, is a blessing and prayer offered to each person who receives the imposition of ashes on Ash Wednesday. These words remind us of our mortality, the limits of a human life. The ashes are about the potentials and the bareness of life. If we were stripped of all worldly things, as Sister Chittister says, that hold us back, keep us from being open, prevent us from connecting between and among, if all of that was taken away, then who would we be? Find that person. Find who love is calling you to be in this season.